And welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael. And before I introduce my guest, I have a little bit of that boring humdrum of housekeeping. Not so boring though, is I have to announce this show is now seen on the Legit Podcast Network. So we are proud and blessed to be a part of a new home. This network is revitalizing itself, and their main focus right now is paranormal, sports, and I believe music. I could be wrong on that, but go check out Legit Podcasts on Facebook and see all the different show types they have. They have a lot of great show hosts, and we are blessed to be a part of that network. And with that being said, I also want to point out, with today being 9/11, we remember and have not forgotten what 9/11 really happened there, and that will never be silenced. And I am wearing a hat today for this show, and I may wear it on more shows, but when I bought it, it's a cap that says loyalty never fades, and proceeds went to the veterans and memorials for them. And so I thought that was a great way to honor the first responders. And so, with that being said, I have a special treat for you all tonight. I have a guest who I am so excited is going to be on the show, and so honored to have her on. I am not even going to attempt to cover what all she is involved with. I will let her introduce herself. So I'm going to turn it over to the one, the only, the honorable, blessed Dani Flitz.
Thank you, Michael. If nobody in the audience knows, or if anybody doesn't know, excuse me, I was am part of the secret space program, MILAB, factions. I've been involved in it since I was a child, and have been working probably, I don't know, realistically about 15 years on getting memories back and trying to figure out what was done to me as a child up until current. I've been probably involved in just about every faction there is, and that's not bragging rights. Just the way it is. I have memories. My memories are a little different than some of the others that are in the programs that speak publicly. I get chunks of stories, so I have bits and pieces of parts. And so you'll have to forgive me on not having just complete fluid memories of things. So, yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yes, and thank you. And I'd like to piggyback on your statement of how memories are different. Is I have a partial memory, which I shared with you before, and haven't really had any since. But yeah, everyone's memories come back differently. So I find it interesting that you and I are both pieces instead of getting a whole. And I wonder if that has to do with something that we were talking about backstage before we started this.
Probably so. Yeah, for sure. That's part of it. Whenever I have my recalls, it seems as though I go into like an altar in my altar's mind, or go see through their eyes, and then when I come back into this body, or this like my consciousness comes back to this body, like that door closes. So I only got the memory of what I saw while I was there, and then when I come back, it seems to just kind of shut the door on the event or the whatever was happening.
So I find it interesting. So you can actually see, and I wonder if it's through I don't know if you're familiar with like quantum entanglements, that's how we're able to access the altars while they're active and see what they see, because I've had moments where I felt like I was looking through somebody else's eyes, but it was around like a local situation, so I figured I was just seeing what my friend was seeing or family member was seeing. I never would have thought, oh my god, there's an altar here. Not picking up an altar.
Yeah, you can do so. With me, I've done several things. So I, like you're talking about, where you go in and you are like first person seeing yourself as them, what they're doing. I've also seen myself like remote viewing myself or my altar, remote viewing the situation, um, and and then also I've just gotten memories where it's a little different than remote viewing yourself or being first person. Um, it's like seeing them. It's like seeing watching a movie almost and seeing yourself. So it's a little different. Just kind of depends. So I've done it all, and then I've also weird. One of the weirdest things I ever saw was myself go into another, like a clone body, like my soul particles go into this clone body or whatever other person it was that I went into their body. It was like physical particles joining and becoming that person. I've seen that happen too. That was weird.
That would be weird to be like seeing yourself in yourself and then looking at yourself and the transferring to yourself. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine processing what that would look like and feel like.
It gets really confusing when you're trying to figure out who is what and what is what. And then, like we were talking about backstage, then you have all the time stuff too. So it's definitely keeps you guessing sometimes what's going on.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting point about how it feels like we're remote viewing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, are we the only ones that can remote view our altars, or can somebody else remote view them? And in which case, would they know us here, seeing our altars, and put together who's who? Or would they be like, I seen your altar, but I had no idea that was you?
So, in my own personal experience, I have a couple of friends that are all in the community and in the programs, and I know that they just from personal experience they have remote viewed altars of my own, and there have been instances where like the whatever's taking place at the because they have abilities too. So the person that was remote viewing my altar, she noticed that they were there and they kind of had to leave, 'cause she saw them. But they also, carry on conversations with, whoever, if they have telepathic abilities. So it's definitely possible and it definitely happens.
Wow, and I'm trying to fathom even how would you even remote view, because to me when I talk with people, they have a general idea of what they're looking for or an experience. They may not know like the exact location or the exact claim, but they have something to go on. And I'm just like sitting here thinking, how would you even begin to remote view an altar you don't even know about?
I think part of it, well, this is just my theory for that question, is that the people that I've had the experience with did have an energetic connection to me or to those altars in some form or fashion. So it may have been easier for them to do that because of that.
Right.
But
So
you also
yeah,
have
that
to
makes
have
sense.
to do it.
Right. And I also was wondering, like, because like you're saying they have that energetic connection, they allow it to a certain degree, because I would imagine if our altars are on missions, it would be shielded from remote viewers, because they would be like, that would be a possible risk to the mission.
For sure, absolutely. There, and I'm sure, I know that if there is a mission where it is important that your location not be known, that whoever's in charge of that crew or that altar or whatever, there's equipment and technology that you can use to have your privacy screen up, cloaking abilities and all of that too. So to keep you from being found or seen. I think these instances were probably because of the energetic connection um, to them or to me.
And I'm kind of curious, because everybody talks about how, like, you could be in the MILABs, or a different group of beings may be operating you, and you could be theoretically having two altars active at the same time. And I've wondered, if the two altars met, like on opposing sides, would they still be able to carry out their missions, or would they be like, wait a minute, I'm attacking myself, something's not right, I can't complete this mission, I can't do harm to myself?
Unfortunately, that is something that I am learning, and especially learning over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, that this is something that they do to us more than you know. Our altars are constantly fighting each other. Um, I had a very nasty um, altar. She's very negative. Let's just say that, and she interacted with at least one of my altars for sure. Um, they had the regen takes and all that. I'm going to try not to scare anybody off with too much information, but I've actually killed the altar has killed the other one, and then they regen her. So they do interact. I think part of it is that, they program the altars. They program the altars to be the specific weapon with the specific abilities, the specific demeanor, attitude, everything about that altar is exactly as they make the factions or the military industrial complex, whichever faction it may be, whatever they need you to be, they program you to be that way with whatever abilities they need. And also, they program you not to know or remember yourself. I know that there has been instances where programming doesn't always hold, and like even for me, I've had parts of myself recognize each other, or maybe recognize the energetic connection of being familiar, or figuring out that was yourself, when you're fighting them or whatever, which is
Right.
a whole mind trip. Let's just say it like that. Into
And
itself.
I have an interesting one for you, thing that I think about with having our altars active while we're active here, and we don't know where they're operating, they don't know where we're at, and you hear the stories, the German term doppelganger, which we've coined it as meaning your opposite or your double. And that's not the actual definition, but when I think about that, though, I remember one day when my mom had hurt her shoulder, so I went to the store for her, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're back!" And I was like, "What do you mean I'm back? I just arrived." And they're like, "You weren't here like 10 minutes ago?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Someone who looks identical to a T to you was here 10 minutes ago." And I thought, that uh, my opposite. And now I think about it in terms of, oh my God, did I almost just walk in on my clone?
it's very possible. And then you can throw in portals, and you can throw in time travel, or there's so many time loops. There's so many things it could have been, but yeah, it's there's so many possibilities, unfortunately, that it could be. But yeah, that's probably exactly what happened.
And in full transparency, and I'm laughing because I told Danny what this means just before we went live, and we were discussing how we have a hard enough time in reality going, okay, past lives, what do they mean? What are they about? And, timelines and all these facets. And then we go and we're like, yes, and we've been schismed and we're living these, like, we're calling altars at the same time. And so not only do we have the past lives and all of that normal stuff to sort through, we have to sort through what's altar, what's ours. And it's
Yep,
like, man, they really, really made it hard for us.
they did, and that's it. That's intentional, of course. Yeah, you get
But
alters and timelines and time loops, time travel, and then, different alters, different dimensions, different time. Did I already say timelines? Yeah, it's past, present, future.
I also, though, have to wonder, with us being schismed and have been out in space and dealing with a lot of these races and probably races we've never heard of yet because we don't know how far out we go, that when we see, like, we hear reports of, oh, these alien sightings, and everyone's like, well, how come I didn't see it? I'm living here. And I wonder, deep inside of me, is because of our being schismed and being out there, they're comfortable showing themselves to us and knowing we're going to be like, oh, hey, I remember you guys deep inside, even though we don't remember them offhand. And so it's like, yeah, that's why we can see UFOs probably more often than most people.
And then we're more accustomed to the idea of it too, so we're not closed-minded. And when we see something like that, we don't you know, brush it away or play it off as something else. We are at least open-minded to the fact that they exist. When a lot of society is not that way, they'll blame it on something else or refuse to acknowledge it at all.
Right. And part of me also is, now that I think about it, it actually just literally popped in my head, was like, say, Bigfoot, for example. A lot of people like James Gilland, I don't know if you're familiar with him, talk about them as being these spiritual beings who sense, your intentions and everything, and are a race of beings that are just here out of love and everything, and they just don't show themselves to everybody because, they of maybe what's inside of you. And I have to wonder sometimes, is, if our alters have come across them, what they would do if they saw us and being like, wait a minute, you guys attacked us. And I was like, I'm not here to attack, I promise. If they
I
would show
actually
themselves or not.
I have a friend, a dear friend, who is very connected to the Sasquatch, and I guess you could even maybe consider that she's like an alter to him, um, but she communicates with us. I mean, they're all about love. Now, let's not. They will defend themselves, and I think that that's a whole can of worms that nobody wants to open up. But they are a
Yeah.
very loving nature, very positive creatures. Uh, my knowledge of them and my interaction with the version of him that is connected with Sasquatch. So, um,
Right.
but you're right. I do probably hide because humans.
Yeah. And so, Woo Riders DG, I am not saying Dani is my alter. She is a complete individual unto herself. We just have similar paths, and so we're just talking about those. So I just want to make that clear for you and everybody else that's watching is Dani is a real person who just is showing an avatar out of her own choice, and I respect that. And so I don't want anyone thinking that I'm talking to myself
No,
in
he's not
another
talking.
state. So
I'm here.
just thank you for asking that, though, because I would hate for someone to think that and go and say, "Oh, Michael was doing a show talking to his altar," and be like, "No, I wasn't. I
We have
never said
alter.
that."
Yeah, we both do.
That would be interesting, though, and I wonder what that would be like. But
To
God,
interview your own alter.
yeah,
That would be interesting.
I'm like, how would we even arrange that? Because I don't even think we have satellites strong enough to hold that.
You'd have to get somebody in a clone here, that'd be in their clone here. Or, like you said, maybe some supersonic internet connection.
Which I'm sure is out there, because
Probably.
so I'm kind of on the fence about Space Force, and do you feel like we operate with them and can choose to operate with them, or do you feel like Space Force is it's an entity to itself and will never use the programs?
So this is my feeling on Space Force. So what I think Space Force is the drip of disclosure to the public regarding like let's say Solar Warden. I think Space Force is basically it's the Navy. It's Space Navy, which would then be Solar Warden. So I do think it's just cover for Solar Warden. That's my thoughts on it. I think it's kind of a cover for the public, but really what it is a like a drip, slow drip of disclosure to get people used to the fact that space exists, that we need protection in space, that we have these guardians, which those of us that are in the secret space program already know that all of these things have existed for forever, and it's nothing new. So that's kind
Right.
of what I feel about it.
And I feel like, to me, the ultimate disclosure moment would be is like something happens somewhere and a helicarrier just drops down, hovers above, and the jets that are supposedly brand new to Space Force are flying off of it. It'd be like, there you are, folks. There's Space
There you go.
Force. And then it just disappears right back up into space and be like, man. And would be even funnier, though, to me, would be is like, you could say, oh, well, they just had one built and be like, have like 30 of them drop down and spaced out somewhere and be like, this is our normal coverage area. We're
Yeah,
here,
I don't know.
folks.
Yeah, exactly. They have to know. I don't know. People are so blind and closed-minded to the reality of the situation. Especially if they're telling you something in the public eye, you have to realize that that's just a little tiny, tiny, small fraction of the reality of what's actually taking place. So, um,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's people would probably freak out, yes, if the whole fleet came down.
Especially if they did like the VTV show where this face appears underneath it. It says, "We come in peace. We're here to help you," and they're like, "Really here to harvest us?" It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, let's just play up the movie just some more or the TV show some more and be like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's have some fun with these people.
Yeah.
So, Woo Riders DG has a question that I think is more up your alley than mine because you're more familiar. And they say, he says, I have a question. People in the SSP have negative handlers. What would be a way to fight back against these handlers?
So, for most of my life, in one form or fashion, I mean, handlers can be so many things. One of the hardest realities that I had to accept was that my whole life has been handled, from a grandmother, mom, and each one played a different role. Their role as a handler was different. My mom, my grandma, my dad, boyfriends, my ex-husband, this, um, a job, my boss. There's just been one thing, and it's all about control. And the first thing that I ever did to break free, I guess, if you want to call it that, was to acknowledge within myself and recognize the signs of what a handler is and what their role is in your life. And a lot of times, it's to bring, to keep you in a state of turmoil or trauma, under control, so that you're easier to control here, but also out there. You're distracted, and it's easier for them to use you out there. And if you're in a certain state of trauma or anger or torture, not torture, but I mean, I guess some people do get tortured, but then you're distracted from what they're doing to the rest of you. It's tricky because a lot of times the handlers are somebody that you love, or you think you love, or you think that loves you. So that accepting that is hard. Um, and I have almost come to the conclusion that, like for me personally, having any type of like a romantic relationship, it just probably will never, ever, ever be normal without having some form, some entity, some being, some outside force trying to manipulate or mess with the relationship or with me. That's been hard to accept, but also it enabled me to take my fate into my own hands in a way when I just chose not to do it. But, we've got friends that come along, especially when you get in this community. They want to handle you also, and handling can be causing drama or wreaking havoc in your life, or there's just so many ways you can be handled and so many different reasons for it, I guess. So it's tough. And when you do figure out, like one of the things I personal experience, getting away from the handler situation is hard to do because they make it near impossible, and so does whoever is controlling them. Will make it dang near impossible for you to get away and from them, but very liberating when you're able to. So I hope that answers your question. It's a tough question to answer.
It is. And I'm of the opinion, though, too, of looking at, I don't like saying, we have negative handlers because I feel like sometimes we do have positive handlers that what they're needing to do is outside of their realm of beliefs and everything, and so they go in turn go to us who we are able to do what they can't do. And so I kind of feel like there are some positive handlers out there that just, but I do know there's a lot more probably negative ones than positive. So
I think positive too is like an unconscious knowing, or they're like unconscious of their handler programming. Like with my mom, a lot of it was not like full on neglect, but a little bit of neglect, which I didn't realize until later in life. But she also, when I was a child, when I was exhibiting some abilities, she had her own abilities too, and so did her dad. My grandmother, which was her mother, had Mason background, and so she really handled them all. So my mother didn't want bad things to come for me, and I don't really know now because she's passed away how she knew that that was a possibility when I was that young. But she basically signed away my my abilities, like to whoever in the programs, out of fear because she thought she was protecting me, which then allowed them to use me. And she didn't know that, so she basically signed me over, trying to protect me from the one thing, they ended up
Right.
using me
Yeah.
anyway. So
And Iron Bear 78 has an interesting scenario. He says he has a recall. I say he. I apologize if you're not a he. I don't know. And so I'm just going with how it feels in my instincts. But it says I had recall where the old and younger super soldiers rebelled. Someone said we didn't need the old guys. Another soldier said, yes, we do. We need everyone. And I find this interesting because I had a feeling of, yes, the super soldiers are rebelling, a lot of them, and we are turning
absolutely,
the tide and turning on our evil, so to speak, benefactors. What's your
yep.
thoughts on that?
Well, it's absolutely, you're correct. It started with us getting our memories back, and then taking control and getting like your alter out of the programs and reintegrating them back to you, and getting more of your abilities back. Or I say we as a community, there's many of us that are doing this. Um, the fact that we're all connecting and communicating, you see what's going on in the community now. And I don't really want to talk about this, but I just want to say one thing. Like when people start coming together, there's more power in this group than we are individually separated, which is what they've tried to do. So you can
Right,
see when everybody starts coming together, disclosure starts happening, then they throw a monkey wrench in the program and then start trying to create division and split within the community amongst everybody. That's why, because we are rebelling. We are rebelling against what they've done to us in the programs, and definitely coming together. So yes, I agree 100%. We do need everyone. Not everyone. Well, how do I say that? It's a consciousness war on top of that too. So we have to be diligent, do our due diligence for ourselves to make sure that we are um, able to be part of that and not
right.
be
And
victims.
I think that ties into what you and I were talking about. And again, I'm going to use the phrase full transparency because we were talking about this backstage before we came on. Is, we would like to think that we can break free, and in breaking free, pick and choose, what missions we take on and what we do with our altars and our other states. And I feel like, if, like you're seeing, the rebellion, I feel like I kind of look at like the show Stargate. I don't know if you've seen that or heard of it.
I've heard of it. For some reason, I never could get into it, and I can see why. It would probably trigger
Right.
memories. It was programming on my part not to watch it so that it didn't trigger memories for me. But yeah, I've heard of it, but not watched too much of it.
Well, what I'm bringing up actually fits what you're saying. Is they're saying that that's a historical timeline of what's going on. And one of the aspects that's interesting in there is it starts with one character named Teal'c, who then leads a whole race of people known as the Jaffa, who serve the parasitic lords, who call themselves gods, and they do their bidding. And once he was awakened to the point that they're not the god, it fed into their culture, and they started rebelling, and the parasitic beings ended up falling and couldn't maintain their power. And it was this great rebellion, and even in the rebellion there was a schism between factions of, well, since they don't have the power, we want the power. And they're like, another faction's like, no, we want the peace. We want to choose our own path. We don't want another dictatorship kind of system. And I feel like what Iron Bear is talking about and what we're talking about is the same thing. It's like we're watching it unfold again, where we're rebelling and the overlords are going to fall because their guardian forces, that slave force, is no longer there. And yeah, there's unfortunately schisms that goes along the way, but in the end, I hope and pray we don't trade like Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot said. I don't want to trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 1,000 tyrants 1 mile away. Kind of example of, I don't want to trade one for the other.
Exactly. Yeah. It's they're not going, military industrial complex is not, they're going to do everything they can to try to prevent us from coming together, old and new. Um, it's going to take everyone for sure, for certain.
Oh yeah. And I feel like it's one of those that, like, we don't need everyone up front. That I feel like it's going to be like they showed in Stargate, where a few lead the rebellion and then more start to follow because they realize, oh my god, we can break free, we can be who we want to be, who we truly were meant to be. And yeah, and I find it interesting. Iron Bear 78 says, I saw a bunch of storage containers full of weapons.
Well, how do I say this? There are parts of us, especially those of us that maybe have, let's just say, a rogue alter or a rogue version of ourselves. They're all working together. So they're probably, if it gets to that point where we're all coming together because we are rebelling and we have to we have to fight. Um, I know that likely chance that we've taken care of some, how do I say this? We've done what we can to make sure that we are fully equipped to be able to fight. Let's just say that.
To
Um,
survive.
to survive. Yep. Um,
But to me, I find it interesting to be containers full of weapons because I know, and in my mind, I know, there are some factions of super soldiers that are psionic, some that are, actual just soldiers. They don't have psionics.
mhm.
But I feel like we, as being through the programs, I feel like the Matrix part of life would kick in, and we could like call up somebody and be like, "Hey, um, we're going to the front lines here, and psionics would totally help." And be like, "Okay, downloading psionics," because everything's downloaded into us. So I feel like, would we really need weapons? And because we would have our nano suits, we would
It
have
depends
our,
on where the fight is. Because if it's here on Earth, and let's just say, that the world goes crazy, and let's just say the U.S. gets invaded, and we're having to fight here, likely chance that there's going to be people that are in the programs get activated. So in that case, if you're here and you're in this body versus, being in a clone body with, like they do with the altars, then you may, that would be when the weapons would come into handy. Now, that's not to say that maybe we have, there's probably, versions of us out there that are clone bodies that are upgraded also that we could bring in, like you're talking about. But like Iron Bear with the weapons and stuff, that would be more probably realistic.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense being here on Earth. Yeah,
Yeah.
because for some reason I almost feel like there's a dampening field here that we can't use, like psionics and a lot of that we can use in space doesn't work here. Like being able to move super fast and a lot of our abilities. It makes me, now that I think about it, I wonder if there is a dampening field to this planet so that we can't
There is. Yeah, there is, and then you also have within your energetic body and your physical body, um, they literally put inhibitors on us to inhibit our abilities, to inhibit a lot of things. But I mean, that is a real thing. Um, and if you get to a point where you're able to check yourself and start seeing these things within your own self, you'll learn that that's something that you need to check for. Um, is the inhibitors that they put on us? It's They do it in your pineal gland, your third eye. A lot of times there's inhibitor collars that will lock down your powers and abilities. There's implants. So not only is it, like you were talking about, a dampening field around Earth, which is actually a thing, and then you have it within your own vessel as well.
Well, and it kind of makes sense too, like thinking about, all the things we can do. My current form, like I have bronchitis that gets triggered by certain things. And I can't help thinking, because I was born with that, was that like you're saying an inhibitor that was put in so that I don't go and push myself to these points and these levels and push myself to recreate this if I was to learn it. It's like a fail safe backup of, yeah, you're not going to be able to because this is not strong enough to, like, super soldier, for example, be like run a mile in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do that with the current system that I have.
Well, if you
And
think about like Iron Bear, but Iron Bear's talking about everybody coming together and rebellion. The last thing they want to do is give you full access to who and what you are. So you wouldn't believe the measures that they go through to make sure that you are as weak as possible here in this existence, so that does not happen. Where there's a rebellion and we raise up and fight back.
and one question I'd like to ask you your opinion of, and I know, everyone's different, but one thing I'm curious of is, for me, I heard someone talking about their experience in the program that kind of triggered me to realizing I was in the programs. What are some signs that people can look to say, oh, maybe I'm a part of this programs, or maybe you're not. But what do you feel like are some things that maybe people may be overlooking that are like, that was probably a sign you were in the programs?
So there can be a lot of things. I would say let's start with your dream time is a big, that's a big one. Um, because a lot of times you have dreams, but there's a lot of times that you're in your dream state and you are in your subconscious or you are in another reality, but it is happening while you're asleep, so it seems like a dream. So that would be my first thing is what happens when you're asleep. Um, Scars, waking up with any type of, I don't know. I've woken up so many different things on my body with no explanation that weren't there that I didn't cause that. But also, there's a lot of people that have mental issues that are in the programs. In fact, that's a probably one of the biggest factors I think that would be easy to recognize is if your anxiety, stress, even maybe not schizophrenic, but that depressed, um, because this stuff does take a toll on our mental state. And if you don't have any explanation or memory, then it can drive you mad. So that's another thing is your mental capacity. Um, a lot of people get mixed up in drugs and stuff because they don't really understand where their pain is coming from or their anxiety or their stress, PTSD, that's another thing. Um, if you're, I don't want to say this is like, for sure, if you take an interest in, let's say, space movies or shows or some of these movies that are out like Marvel, and a lot of times that may kind of trigger you into remembering something. Not everybody that watches a movie, okay, let me disclaimer, not everybody that watches a Marvel movie is in the programs, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes these things trigger memories. So I mean those are some things I would say. Um, I was on a trip recently um, in Florida, and there was a homeless man at this store that we stopped at. And we were walking, and we just kind of stopped and started talking to him. And you could tell he was not mentally stable, let's just say that. But we just mentioned, like asked him just randomly, hey, do you have memories of space or being out in space or, any military dreams? Anyway, so it was amazing, not surprising that he remembered things. And I think a lot of too the people in the homeless community were in the programs, and they have no idea or no outlet to figure out what has happened to them. People just chalk them up as crazy, and then they live in the streets with this mental condition. So, but yeah, it was pretty interesting to hear him and validating for him. So it was kind of nice to walk away knowing that at least he had maybe the beginnings of some answers to what he was going through.
Right. And I want to piggyback on something you had said that I think is important for people to realize why it's hard for all of us to come forward and share our experiences and why it's brave for those of us who do, and why I appreciate when, like you being here and coming forward a little bit. And that is, there is no system in place to where we can go to like a clinic and say, hey, I'm having this happen. And they're like, okay, let's sit down, let's look at this, and answer it like the soldiers are getting now for PTSD, as and head traumas are, now becoming a thing. And that's why I feel like as a community, it hurts me when I see, these schisms and everything happening, because I'm like, we got nowhere to go. And so if we're going to start infighting amongst ourselves, it's like I feel like, how are we going to evolve and make anything out of ourselves and break free of anything if we can't even get along together.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we should be like best friends, and never argue or anything, but I mean, you know what I mean by not be causing these schisms and putting other people down and like making one say like I'm more SSP than you are, so you have to do what I say.
Mhm. Well, and everybody's journey is different. Everybody gets memories in a different way. Everybody handles those memories differently. It's it is sad. You're right. The way a lot of people get handled in the community whenever they're first trying to speak out or get answers. I was always that person that was just kind of like an observer for a long time. I got in some of the SSP pages on Facebook and wouldn't interact because for that, the fear of um, being shunned, I guess, but also, I didn't have a lot of confidence in my memories, and a lot of people are looking for validation on what they're remembering, and that's hard to come by when in, when you're first getting memories and you're first trying to figure things out. For me, in my experience, and I know a lot of people have gone through this, the programming that is installed into you really kicks in, and every turn you're left with doubt or somebody saying, "Oh no, you're not this or that didn't happen." So it gets kicked into full gear. So they're hoping that you just stop and don't further look, and just accept the fact that, oh, I'm just crazy, or oh, I'm making it up, or whatever. So it is difficult when you're first remembering and trying to figure things out.
Right. It's
And
like you turn a corner and you hit a wall, and
yeah, exactly.
you don't have someone there to say, well, that wall's not really there, and you can walk through it and keep going. And it's like, oh. And I feel like that's the hurt is when you hit the wall, when the people you relied on to go, yeah, go further, are now saying, nope, that's a sign you're this. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What? And yeah. And so that's, yeah. And I'd like to see the community come together. And the problem is, too, is like we were saying before, is there's infiltrators.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so, as hard as it is for, I hate to say, like the legit, real people in it, there are people that are coming in and claiming like false activity. And it's like, it really makes it hard for people to come forward because it's like you feel like, God, if I make one misspeak, I'm going to be forever marked as a fake
Fake.
person in it when I'm not.
The thing with memories too is that, like, I had, let's just say 2013, 2014, I started really getting a lot of downloaded recalls, and I didn't have a lot of answers then. And I would, back then, I figured out that I would start journaling my recalls. So I started writing them down. The great thing about that is that when I started connecting to people that I remembered, that remembered me, and we started talking about our experiences and our memories, those memories that I had written down, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, they start to come full circle, and then there's a puzzle piece that I didn't have before that now I have. So memories and recalls, because a lot of times you don't have the full picture, the full story. Sometimes you're programmed not to remember it right. There's cover memories, you know, so you don't remember what happened. Um, they change over time when you start getting more of the picture, the bigger picture of the story comes through. I mean, your memories can change, and that's normal. So it does make it hard whenever you have legit recalls or memories, and then you've got somebody just coming in pretending because they want to make fun of people that have real experiences. It's that's one of the things in this community that is the hardest thing is for us to trust. It is
Right.
you can't like who can you trust, and that usually if you ask anybody, that's very few people, and you just deal with a lot of infiltrators and people get compromised, and they have alters that are working out there to they have a negative agenda, so it's hard sometimes.
It is, and in all honesty, Eve and I were talking earlier, and I'm referring to Eve Howard, who was on the show earlier on a prior episode, and she was surprised that I noticed it, I think, because a lot of the people coming forward and in the beginning with the SSP were all males, and there weren't a lot of females coming forward. So all of a sudden, when the females started coming forward, I was noticing like not a lot of people wanted to acknowledge that. And I was telling Eve that I saw one of the podcast episodes in the Super Soldier Facebook group when I was there, and it was titled The Women of the SSP. And I was like, I saw that and I was like, that's who I want to get on the show, because I feel like that's who doesn't truly have a full voice yet in the community, because a lot of people just want to talk to the main people in the front who were the first. And I was like, there's no guarantee that they were the first because nobody would listen.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, like me, I've been probably in just about every faction there is. And that, again, not bragging rights, but it's, it's just society. People don't want to listen to women a lot of the times. And I'm not going to get on that. But it is great to have a voice and to have a safe place to talk about the things that have happened. The part of the problem too is that, like with women, it's uncomfortable when you talk about the things that really happen to us, and like I mean, it happens to all of us, men and women. The rapes and the torture and the trauma.
Right.
Nobody really wants to talk about that stuff, especially coming from a woman, because I mean, I guess it's harder to hear maybe from a woman, but men go through it too. I mean, I guess people have a hard time believing that women have the ability to fight and they can actually kick somebody's butt. And I don't know, but I've been a lot of things in these factions, and so.
No, I think you kind of hit some of it on there. Is like, yeah, I mean, growing up, being a guy myself, it's like, if a girl was to push me down and like knock me down, I could hear in my head all the guys laughing, going, "You just got beat up by a girl,"
Yeah,
and
you just get
it
a
was like a
girl.
stigma. And I was like, there's, it's not my, I could be like, yeah, I got beat up by a girl because I didn't want to fight back because she's a girl, which is another stigma, because it's like we're afraid to hurt them. And
Yeah.
it's like we've been so programmed to each gender being this or that I mean, look at our military. It was until what, 20, 30 years ago that women were allowed even on the front lines,
Yeah.
and they're kicking butt and doing, more for the military, I think, than a lot. And I'm not discounting the guys that are in there, so don't, you know, make it sound like I'm pro women only in the military. No, the balance needs to be maintained, but we need to understand and embrace and lose the stigmas of what we grew up with, and re-educate ourselves, so to speak, in going, yeah, there can be, like you're saying, being in every faction, there could be 10 women on a squad of 15 people.
Yeah,
And
I've been
they
in both.
do,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just saying, they do just as much damage as we do because we've all been altered. And I would actually venture to say the males need more altering strength wise than the females because, and I would argue that based on the motherhood instinct of, like, when a kid is pinned under a car and calls out for mom, mom can actually lift the car off of him because she has this inner strength that comes out when the kid is calling for her and is needed to in that moment. And so I feel like that gives you all an edge in the programs because you have that inside you. We don't.
Yeah, they. So I've got alters that were in a you know woman crew, a full mission with just women. I've got an alter, my Kruger alter, or Dani. She is, um, she has been in a four-man crew with being a female. So we all go through the same training, and a lot of times it's who survives the training, the torture, the trauma, who's there at the end, and who's the strongest. So I mean, the women that are in, let's just say the ones that are battling or fighting or warriors or whatever they are, they've more than likely earned that position. They're not going to send somebody, especially out there in space with the abilities and the technology and all of that everybody has. They're not going to send in somebody that's weak to fight.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is looking at our own history, there is a massive tribe and culture that is rarely talked about in history anymore. In the ancient times, and I don't know how much of a historian you are, Dani, so you may or may not know where I'm going with this, but everybody goes, yeah, the Spartans were feared, the Macedonians were feared, the Persians were feared, and they're like all these mixed gender male warrior, groups. But there was one group that was feared, actually, I think, above all of those, and that was the Amazons.
Mm-hmm. The
And the
women, yeah.
Amazons was a culture where women ruled, women warriors, women had all the power, and the men were the slaves that stayed back, did the cooking, did the hunting that the woman wanted him to. And it was like a total opposite to what we were taught. And they could go toe to toe or best any culture, I think, out there, in my opinion. And I feel like that's why they're kind of working on being erased out of history. And you only hear about them through like TV shows or type shows like Hercules, Legendary Journeys, for example, talks about the Amazons or Xena. And it's like shows that are people like, well, those aren't real. Those are make believe characters. And so it's like they get written off, but they're right there
Mm-hmm.
in front of you saying, this is real.
Yes, exactly. And they take a lot of, especially like just us women too. Uh, your DNA, your genetics, the things that you've done in past lives, all of that stuff factors in your bloodline to who and who they choose and what they use you for, and what your abilities are, and what you're able to withstand and survive out there. So, um, with that said, also, I've got alters that are male. I've got three, maybe four now that I'm aware of that are male. So, um, and then most of the male there will also have women alters, but It's just when you start getting DNA augmented, you get implants, you get technology added, and then, of course, the training and all of that. It kind of levels the playing field in ways.
It does, and it's interesting you bring up DNA augmentation because before I knew about this in my metaphysical studies, I would talk to my teachers in the metaphysics and be like, can I alter my genetics so that I can do this or that or become more of this and have this ability become more apparent? And they'd be like, yeah, you can definitely do that. And hearing you talk about that made me wonder, God, is that another moment where my programming was leaking through and
Probably so.
I was having a moment of clarity without knowing what I was being cleared about?
Mm-hmm. Knowledge that you didn't know why you have it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because like who would sit there in a room full of people and go, yeah, I'd like to have the ability to alter my DNA. Where would that come from?
Unless you're watching a lot of space shows, sci-fi shows.
Right. And, talking about sci-fi shows and movies, I know we're over the hour and I don't know if you need to go or not,
Yeah,
but
pretty quick. But I have a little bit left. It's fine.
okay. The movie Tron Evolution, did you see that one?
I've not seen. Is that the old one or the new one? That's the
That's the
old one,
new
isn't it?
one.
Oh, the new one. I
The
tried.
second
Okay, so
one.
yeah, this is the and more programming on my part. I tried to watch it and I just could not. I couldn't do it. Couldn't stick
Well,
with it.
there's a scene at the end where they discuss this race of beings in the digital world who were able to heal themselves, and he was wanting to bring them into the real world for that reason. And they show a scene where she has her arm spliced off and he's looking at her disc with the arm is missing and sees the DNA strand where that's broken and grabs it, pulls it out, and it disappears. And a new DNA strand appears, and it goes, okay. He goes, yeah, give her about, I think it's like 13 hours or something like that. I forget how long it was. But her arm just sat there and just slowly regenerated. And I can't help wondering, if that's another one of those abilities that we have in the programs that's being blocked because, how could you explain to someone losing a limb and then the next day shows up and goes, oh, it's okay, I got a new one, we're good. Where do
They
you need me today?
so you can do, if you imagine, they could do a couple of things with that. I mean, aside from the regen tank, they also, if you have DNA, they do the chimera splicing with your DNA too. So if they put reptilian or Draco DNA in you, then that is absolutely a possibility that you could regenerate and grow your own parts back because of the reptilian DNA.
Which kind of makes me wonder, the starfish, are those reptilian like leftovers, remnants here on the planet? Because I know in studying in science that if you sever something off of a starfish, it regenerates it.
Maybe it's the sea reptilian.
But so I'm gonna go ahead and call it here because I want to respect that your time is valuable as well. And so I appreciate you coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me. This has been actually a really nice conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and that means a lot, actually. And that's something that'll remain between me and you. Why I say that.
Yes, I get
But
it.
so one thing, if you don't mind, real quick, is what, with all that you have gone through and where you're at today, what would be a golden nugget that you would want to leave someone who maybe just becoming aware of, or maybe thinking about coming out and declaring, their roles, or, or maybe just curious about the programs themselves? But what would be a golden nugget that you would like to leave the audience?
So, probably the one thing that I even said this to you, the one thing I would suggest is that if you feel in your gut there's something more to what you are feeling or knowing or remembering, stick with it. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not part of something, because that was one thing that happened to me. So I had, you know, just the will and didn't accept no for an answer until I finally started to break some of my own programming and was able to start getting my memories and answers. So that's what I say. If you feel something in your gut, stick with it. Don't let anybody tell you no or discourage you. Um, one of the things that helped me, and I'm just gonna plug somebody really quick. One of the people that I trust and has helped me tremendously. Um, if anybody is looking for something like this, was I did a session. I've done many sessions, but with Stephen Popiotek. He's kind of who helped me open the gates to getting powers back and abilities, and then doing a lot of the things that have been done. So it's an ongoing process, but that was a big door opener for me. So that's something I would look into. And people don't know who you can trust, and that is a big thing. There's a lot of, not everybody has your best interest out there. In fact, a lot of people don't. So that's the hard part, is finding somebody that you can trust to allow to connect to you and at least help you undo some things so that you are able to figure stuff out. So that's what I would say.
I like it, and that's a really good point. So I, you know, I'm gonna say to everyone that's watching, wherever you are in the world, my usual ending is, I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. So, let's see if I can pull this off, or what's gonna come of it. We'll see. So, wherever you are in the world, make it a beautiful day, night, afternoon. If you're asleep, kudos to you, because a lot of us are wishing we could do that. And so I think, as Dani pointed out, when you're experiencing something, do your own research into it. Don't blindly trust people around you. Find someone who you feel resonates with you and you feel has your best interest at heart. If you need help, reach out and find that person. Don't try and be the hero and do it all yourself, because I can tell you my experience, I would be lost in this world of discovering what I'm discovering without friends. And so definitely do your own research, find what resonates with you, find your own truth, and find the people that will support you and build that community up. And hopefully, that community, if you're in the program, leads to people like Dani and I, who are here, and we know people that may be able to help, and
Yeah.
others. And if not, you know, we're not going to discount you. We're going to embrace you and accept you from where you're at. And so with that, I'm going to say good night, everyone, and happy remembrance of 9/11 Day.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.